Now, let's go over the events of Godzilla vs. Kong, since Madison is somewhat both the main character and the leader of Team Godzilla. That, and she was the only besides Bernie, she was the only person who believed that Godzilla was being provoked, and was willing to defend Godzilla from her dad, who began hating Godzilla again, literally after trying to forgive Godzilla from back in Godzilla King of the Monsters, you freaking idiot. So you mean to tell me that random ass redemption arc that you had in that damn movie was for nothing? Now, the difference between my version of What If Madison became a Godzilla, and obviously Go Team Godzilla, is that Go Team Godzilla had her little scenario to begin shortly after Godzilla vs. Kong. My scenario somewhat began in 2014, but Madison fully becomes a Godzilla during Godzilla vs. Kong. So there's a big difference, honestly. I just wanted to pointed that out there. So obviously, with Madison having more of Godzilla's powers, this would result in Madison's transformation. Madison will transform into a Godzilla. Now, how would Madison's Godzilla form would look like? Well, if Toho allowed Legendary to continue doing a species of Godzilla, maybe we would have had a scenario where we saw different Godzillas looking completely different from the current Godzilla. But like I said, this is a what if, so we're allowed to go crazy with this what if. So honestly, in my honest opinion, I think Madison's Godzilla form should look a lot more like this. Alright, so Madison's Godzilla plus physical appearance should look very similar to the evolved Godzilla. Skinny, longer arms, skinnier legs, and so obviously Madison will be far more agile than Godzilla, and obviously a bit more faster than Godzilla. The second part of Madison's overall physical design of her kaiju form is that she'll have larger dorsal spines, similar to the 2018 dorsal spines. Note how I did not include the New Empire design spines. So I'm just leaving the New Empire design spines out of this. So yeah. Anyways, obviously Madison will have the larger dorsal spines that the monster, the 2018/2021 Godzilla ended up having, and of course for the tail, she would have a Godzilla 2014-like tail. So basically, her overall, her kaiju's physical form is basically like this. Full-on body of evolved Godzilla. Spine, large dorsal spine like the 2018 Godzilla, and a long tail of the 2014 Godzilla. Put all those three combined, and you get Madison's Godzilla form. Ignore the elbow spikes, by the way. Just ignore them. Now, what about Godzilla? Now, what about her height? What about her height? How big is she gonna be? Well, currently, let's look at Godzilla's height currently in the MonsterVerse. He is currently 120 meters, which should make him pretty freaking big, honestly. Now, how big would Madison's Godzilla form would be? Will she be around the same size, or will she be slightly smaller? Now, since Madison didn't absorb a whole lot of radiation, I highly doubt that she'll be the exact same size as Godzilla. I would say she would be most likely shorter than Godzilla. I would say rather 1, 110 meters, or 2, 112 meters. Me personally, I prefer a 112 meter tall Godzilla. Madison's not too large, but at the same time, she's not too small either in her Godzilla form. Now, what about her atomic breath? What would her atomic breath color be like? Now, the thing about a lot of people for the MonsterVerse, like a lot of people when they're doing like their own little fan stories of the MonsterVerse, mostly doing like the whole Great Titan War between the Godzillas and the Great Apes, is that they all think that all the Godzillas have the exact same color of atomic breath, which is blue. Which honestly, I don't see that from happening. If all Godzillas are going to look completely different from each other, that means they could most likely have different colors of atomic breath. So let's say Madison's atomic breath would be something a bit more like this. Rather a pinkish color, a somewhat of a gray atomic breath, that would be interesting. Or, how I personally prefer it, I prefer Madison having a purple atomic breath. Now, let's go over on how would this transformation happen and what would be the cost of it. Let's say that Madison's transformation happens when she senses Mechagodzilla and a piece of Ghidorah the exact same time that Godzilla senses it. This would trigger her powers to fully transform. Now, once Madison transforms, she would realize that she is no longer a human, and she is officially a Titanus Gojira. Now, of course, with her having Godzilla's powers, this would also mean that she would inherit the instincts of a Titanus Gojira. And since a Titanus Gojira is basically an alpha apex predator, and with her having the ability to sense another threat, her Godzilla instincts will get the better of her, and they will drive her to go find this threat and eliminate it. Now, Madison will at first kind of struggle when it comes to swimming in the ocean. But let's say that possibly with a little bit of help with her Godzilla instincts, she is able to somewhat make it there to the area where Godzilla attacks one of Apex's facilities. Now, once when Madison arrives, Apex will be completely caught off guard and shocked of the arrival of a second Titanus Gojira. And Godzilla would be both surprised and extremely happy. Because we gotta keep in mind that the MonsterVerse Godzilla is somewhat considered as the last of its kind. Right? And he's been alone for quite some time. So with him seeing another Titanus Gojira, this would get Godzilla having, like, a lot of excited emotions. But then once the military starts firing at both of them, Madison will try to try to get away from it, and she's like roaring in confusion. She's like waving her arms around and trying to control her tail. And this is where Godzilla will start to sense something is odd with Madison. Because, well, let's say that he interacted with other members of his kind before, and he's never seen them act like this before. So obviously this would be very confusing for Godzilla to witness. But he's just, overall, he's just like, what the heck are you doing? But Godzilla will be mostly focused on destroying the Apex facility first. And then, after he destroys the facility, he then takes his time to train, to figure out what's going on with Madison. Of course, Godzilla will come up to his own theories. And his theories are rather, 1, Madison was born an orphan, and as a result, no one taught her how to use her powers. Or number 2, this Titanis Gojira was just, well, is just completely new and doesn't know how to use her powers. And he kind of chooses a little bit of the both of them. Yes, like Godzilla would think that Madison was a Titanis Gojira that was born without parents. And as a result, she was never taught how to use her abilities, like her iconic atomic breath and nuclear pulse. Now, Godzilla would take it upon himself to train Madison. So, at first, Godzilla will view her as a student. And you kind of say Madison will kind of have a situation that is very similar, and I mean very similar to Susan from Monsters vs. Aliens made by DreamWorks. And this would be somewhat important, because let me point out that Susan, she was once a normal human girl until she got hit by a meteor, which granted her the power to basically grow gigantic, give her like super durability and of course incredible strength, and ends up getting a new name called Ginormica. And at first, Susan denied her new monster life and just wanted to go back to her old life. But after her fight with the giant robot and break up with Derek, Susan ends up realizing that her monster life is way better than her normal life, and as a result, she wants to stay as a monster. Madison will be in that very same position, for where she wants to go back to her human life, because her human life is all important to her. But she'll still follow Godzilla's teaching because, well, he's the only thing that can help her to understand her powers and, of course, how to use them. And, of course, her strength and other abilities.